Welcome to the Occupational Safety Leadership Podcast, episode number 286. In this one, we're going to sit down and talk with a gentleman from the company called Gaize. It's Ken Fichtler. I'll
Fichtler.
have Ken, could you say that again? I did a really good job of butchering your name, bud.
Fichtler.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And we'll sit down and talk about impairment testing. So I found Ken's I don't know if I want to call it a headset, a helmet, and just did the research and just kind of thought about how um, drugs are a little more prevalent in today's world. So I really wanted to kind of dive in and do this. I'm a little bit out of this realm. A lot of my info is dated. I've not done this kind of stuff in a number of years, but just fascinated by this whole thing. I think it's really just a really great thing. Um, Ken, could you introduce what you guys kind of do and a little bit about why that we're looking at impairment testing?
You bet. And thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. My company is called Gaize. I'm the founder and CEO, and what we've done is we've created a real-time test for impairment from cannabis and other drugs. The challenge that companies have had historically, and it's become very acute in recent years with cannabis legalization, is that they have had no tool that can actually detect impairment from substances other than alcohol. Alcohol works very uniquely in the body, and so measuring the amount of it in the body can tell you how impaired someone is. And virtually no other drug works that way, where you can measure some amount in the body and determine impairment. So a chemical drug test is able to tell you if someone used that substance previously, but under no circumstance can a chemical test tell you how impaired someone is on something like cannabis. So this has been a major challenge for workplaces that are operating in legal states, in cannabis legal states, where they have safety sensitive employees. Uh, there's been this choice that they've had to make about whether they keep a workplace safe or they allow people to use a legal substance, and we have allowed them to have both.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you. So I think I'd like to kind of could you hold up the headset
Yeah,
and then just
you
kind
bet.
of go through. So if I'm understanding it properly, a person literally just puts on the headset
Yeah, so
and
that looks
it'll
like
look
this.
at.
Looks just like a VR headset your kids probably have. It's an all-in-one portable unit. This one has very specialized eye tracking sensors in it, which allow us to, the headset, of course, allows us to conduct these eye tests that we're doing, and then we can extract very high precision eye movement data and video, analyze the data to look for these signs of impairment, and retain the video as evidence.
Mhm. Wow. That is really high tech then. So by looking at the eyes, okay. So I did have a list of like other type questions. I'm sure that somebody would say, well, but what if I was sleepy?
Yeah. We get this all the time. So the tests that we use are based on the law enforcement drug recognition expert eye tests. And these are tests that have been around for about 45 years in use by law enforcement for that period of time. And they've got a lot of scientific research behind them. They've been used in court, many, many times in all 50 states. And these tests have been shown really to be sensitive at detecting impairment from cannabis and most other drugs. Law enforcement officers are reasonably good at detecting impairment using these tests. And what we've done at Gaize is we've really automated them and used very advanced machine learning and data science to take the accuracy to a whole new level.
Wow, wow. So then this will not come back and say for precision wise, the person has a blood alcohol level of X or it has detected some drug in it just literally says impairment
Yeah.
on there.
So notwithstanding a limited number of medical conditions which can cause similar eye movement, there's very few, but these tests are sensitive specifically to drug and alcohol impairment. Each substance category causes somewhat unique eye movement changes and pupil size changes. And so what our system is doing is it's picking up on those indicators. And things like fatigue are there are certainly ocular indicators for fatigue, and we're working on adding that to the system. But today, it does not detect fatigue, and we're not going to have a false positive or something from fatigue.
Right. How about like your everyday like prescription type of drugs? Could they cause some form of I hate to call it a false positive, but a false positive.
Those would be a true positive in
I'm
many
sorry,
cases,
true
right?
positive.
So
I'm
yeah,
sorry,
I mean,
yes.
as an example, we run into people who are using prescription opioids all the time, and so this is an area where someone could be prescribed opiates for pain and be using them appropriately, but that person still probably should not be operating equipment that day. And so what we're detecting in those cases is a true positive, but those people really need to be put in a non-safety sensitive role for the period for which they'll be taking that drug. Standard things like cough medicine or something are not going to cause impairment. So we're not going to detect something like that. One of the things we're doing right now actually is a clinical trial investigating psychotropic prescription drugs. So we're looking at basically anything that's prescribable by a psychiatrist, because a lot of these things are unstudied in terms of their effects on the eyes. We have an understanding of what things like benzodiazepines are doing, but there has not been a lot of study on what does overusing a prescription ADHD medication look like, as an example. And so we need
Oh,
to understand that.
uh-huh.
Um, it appears that when used appropriately, these substances do not cause impairment, other than things like benzodiazepines. Um, so, like an ADHD medication, a mood stabilizer, antipsychotic, are not going to cause impairment in the traditional sense. But we're just making sure that those things are included in our data set, so we're not going to, detect them inappropriately.
Right. Well, anytime that you can kind of go back and add in that data and just really understand that, that's also a really good point that the person who's taking it, of course, is also hearing that too, and not hearing a, hey, look, I just found this thing, so put it on. It
Yeah.
either says you're impaired or you're not impaired. Well, that would be awesome, of course, and great, and probably really fun at parties and things like that. But that's not going to help you out in the workplace. That's
Yeah.
also not going to help you out with a selling point because anybody who buys this, of course, has to go back and say, this is how I introduce it to the workforce then. And you want to introduce it as a positive thing, not as something that, we got this because everyone's high and you're all going to be punished and fired and everything else. We just want to talk about impairment, people.
Yeah.
So
And it is a positive thing. And employees are sometimes a little nervous when they first hear of it, but as soon as they understand what this is doing, we're only looking for impairment. We cannot look backwards in time and look at the joint you smoked last weekend. So this is really
right,
allowing people who are safely and responsibly using cannabis on their personal time to also keep their job, and maintain a safe workplace. So it's really an advantage to the employees, and they very quickly understand that. It's only the bad actors that end up having a problem.
right. I like that. It's also a real time. You're going to get it back then.
Yeah.
So I have sent down a couple of folks who gave an air quotes a cold sample when the doctor would call me and say, "Hey, this could not have come from this person." And you hear the whole, hey, it was me. The doctor doesn't know what he's talking about, but then they never want to go back and do follow up.
Yeah.
At least it's literally almost a yes, no, pretty darn fast.
Yeah, cheating is absolutely rampant in chemical drug testing. You can
Mhm.
go down to the corner head shop and buy fake urine. There's any number of products that are designed to strip drugs from your hair, your saliva. There's all sorts of hacks out there on how to cheat these drug tests. The great advantage that we have is that you're putting it on someone's head right in front of you, and we're getting an instant reading about whether or not they're currently impaired. So it's not like there's opportunity to adulterate the sample or something. And we have a bunch of different compliance checks built in as well so that we can find out if someone is trying to cheat the system and solve that problem before we finish the test.
Right. I mean, I always knew about a about cheating, but I never knew about you could literally buy fake urine and all that
Oh
other
yeah.
stuff. Like, wow,
Yeah.
that's really a very intricate, almost like they've thought through the whole, well, people are going to do it anyway, so how do I protect um how do I protect my base, of course.
Mhm.
So wow. How
Yeah.
about that of all things? And yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
So
And the
could
other
you
problem,
go
of course, with chemical drug test is you're looking for just the handful of substances the test was designed to look for. So, in the DOT test, which is the most common test that's out there, you're looking for five substances, or, broadly five chemical groups, cocaine, amphetamines, prescription opiates slash heroin, uh, THC, and PCP. We haven't really seen PCP in the United States in a decade or so. And frankly, there are a vast number of substances that one could choose to use and completely fly under the radar of those tests, of that test in particular. So people who are relying on the DOT test to maintain a safe workplace, it's kind of not quite what they think it is in most cases. Our test is great because it's very generalized. So we can detect impairment from cannabinoids, including synthetic cannabinoids, opiates, including fentanyl, nitazines, heroin, et cetera, and the prescription ones, stimulants, so things like speed, cocaine, ecstasy, um, dissociative anesthetics, including ketamine, alcohol and depressant drugs, and some psychedelics. So it's a very, very broad set of substances that we can detect impairment from, that is significantly broader than what a chemical test can find.
okay, okay. Um so you hear a awful lot about things like like fentanyl. So
Mhm.
what family does fentanyl fall under?
That's an opiate.
Okay, so then
Yeah,
you would find that on the DOT then.
correct.
Okay,
No,
gotcha.
sorry. On the DOT,
Uh,
you would not. So fentanyl is
Okay,
it's
good. Okay.
Yeah, so this is a really important point, actually. Fentanyl is under consideration for an addition to the DOT test, but it's not in there yet. And the
Wow.
current opiate portion of the DOT test does not detect fentanyl use. And so people who are using fentanyl are kind of completely able to exist and remain employed as long as they're not literally nodding off on the job or something.
Right, right, right. Wow. I mean, because you always hear about all the deaths all over
Yeah.
the country and how the use is really rampant. I kind of thought that would have been already there. That's why that I had to kind
Many
of do
people
like a
do.
little bit of that follow-on question, like, wow, how about that?
Yeah, yeah, it's terrifying. And even, companies that are doing a significantly expanded drug panel, up to 12 drugs at a time, are still usually not testing for fentanyl. So that's one that has not been popular to include in drug panels for some reason, and it's starting to be. But many companies have had the same drug panel in place for, a decade or more, are not going to be testing for it today, and they don't even realize it.
Right, 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 right. And if it's somebody like me, my knowledge is dated, I'd have to literally sit down and kind of understand the drugs like nowadays and any of the slang words and just to
Yeah,
kind of even ask the right question to even say, hey, I want my panel to look like the following, you know,
yeah,
because I gotta kind of suspect that certain drugs are going to have more of a localized flavor in other places, of course,
absolutely.
as
Yeah.
opposed to others
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, you definitely see regional drug trends, and those can change very rapidly with supply. So if there's a big bust, people will transition to a new substance often, or if there's an oversupply, people transition onto that substance. So it's a very dynamic situation, and there's an average of two new substances that are introduced to the drug market every week. So it is constantly evolving, and it's a very difficult thing. It's like playing whack-a-mole with a chemical drug test. You just sort of cannot stay on top of it.
Right, right, right. But if you came up with a generalized panel, you came up with something that would almost kind of say like a yes, no, and then you could investigate further,
Mhm. And
of
that's basically
course.
what we do.
Right,
So we can find these substance categories. In most cases, we can, figure out what substance category is causing the impairment and make a recommendation for the follow-up chemical test. And so in those cases, let's say we find an opiate, and we can say we do an opiate panel, which would tell someone, okay, well, we need to be doing an entire opiate panel rather than our five panel, in which case, if someone's impaired on fentanyl, you would miss them under the standard test. But if you did a whole opiate panel, you would find it.
right, 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 right. And I gotta like suspect that companies out there, are always thinking like, well, if I haven't caught anybody on my 5 panel, do I really want to go to a 10 panel? Do I really want to go to something else? Um, I don't think anybody wants to purposely think they have it. They have an issue out there. I think they're just
Yeah.
really trying to make sure that it doesn't get out of control. They're not part of a safety sensitive job, all that kind of stuff then.
This usually becomes a problem when there's been an incident that forces someone to rethink and take a look at the policy. And that could be a lawsuit because you terminated someone for using legal THC. It could be that there was some sort of safety incident or an injury or something that caused you to need to reevaluate. But those are often the scenarios in which people are then calling us and saying, "Hey, we need to solve this problem really fast."
Right, 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 right. Yeah. So while we're talking about the different levels out there, I should say levels, the different drugs out there. So
Mhm.
is there a big difference between the interstate and the intrastate? Because one, of course, the DOT it mandates and the five and all that kind of stuff. Then, have you seen where levels are a little bit different in different states, and it's not going to be a one size fits all out there?
Yeah, definitely. From a legal perspective, there's massive differences between states in terms of, both substances that are legal, in some cases, levels of substance that are allowable before you're considered to be impaired. There's other legal considerations as well in terms of, what drug tests can be done and what action can be taken based on those. And that's not even getting into the union issues, which are a whole nother level. So just talking about kind of the legal situation, the federal government still considers cannabis a Schedule One substance, and it seems like that might change at some point here. But for now, that's what it is. So that is a substance that has a high potential for abuse and no medical use. So
Ah, okay.
based on our understanding of the medical uses of cannabis, it clearly doesn't meet that definition. But in the eyes of the federal government, that's where we are today. And so, from an intrastate or an interstate perspective, obviously cannot be using it if you're a federal employee, if you're a federal contractor, if you're in a federally regulated position like energy, as an example, or anything to do with transportation. Those are the areas where you're still precluded from using even legal cannabis if you live in a state with legal cannabis. The intrastate laws, the laws that are within the state, may allow you to use cannabis legally. In some states, you can use other substances legally. And then there's substances that are prescribable, but also used very commonly illicitly. And ketamine is a good example of that, where it's legal to prescribe, very commonly used for things like treatment-resistant depression, but it's also very common to use recreationally. And so that can cause real challenges as well.
Wow.
So it's a very complex landscape. What I think is really, really important for people to understand is that um, alcohol is a very unique substance in terms of how it works in the body. And so that has allowed us to create the zero point zero 0.08 BAC limit that is kind of the federal standard and the standard that most states have for impaired driving. So if you're above a zero point zero 0.08, you're considered to be impaired. And that's a reasonably accurate way to think about alcohol impairment. No other drug, virtually, with the exception of some inhalants, works that way. So, THC, as an example, you cannot look at the amount of THC in the body and determine how impaired someone is. That is just simply not how it works. Science has demonstrated that very conclusively for decades. And so, laws that are attempting to kind of apply the alcohol testing rubric to other drugs like THC are completely scientifically baseless. So that's a real challenge. And what we need to be doing instead of those sorts of laws is looking at how the drug is actually impacting the body, which is what we do. We look at, are you currently experiencing impairment using a government recognized standard for that. And that allows us to be very confident in the decisions that we are giving to our employers and allows them to then make, very confident decisions about what's going to happen with that employee. States need to broadly get on board with this. It's always really crazy when we see things like per se limits for THC. I mean, there's just fundamentally no scientific basis for that at all. And states always get sued over these things, and it just takes a really long time to eventually get overturned. So that's kind of the situation, but it is complicated for sure.
Right. Well, and that's probably why that I really like your headset is maybe I'm just a very simple person, but you kind of pop it on and you say yes, no. It's
Yep.
not sent out to the lab. It's not somebody who says, hey, you took a hair sample, you did this or you did that. Now I'm going to challenge the way that you did it in the chain of custody and all the other stuff that goes along with it. It's
Yep.
literally a yes, no. And then if it's a yes, well, then you can do follow-up testing. I think
Yep.
it could also save companies a lot of money, also if you
Yeah.
wanted to do a random program, um, you could do a random on this fashion and then say, well, now that there's a positive, now you really got to go down and go, um, gosh, I hate to even say like give urine, give blood, whatever the deal is,
Sure.
just because my knowledge is a little bit dated in this whole area, then I think that that would actually be cost savings to
It's a
people.
massive cost savings. Yeah. I
So
mean, we work with some of the biggest safety sensitive employers in the country today. And what they are finding is a really significant deterrent effect against people showing up to work while impaired. As I said, we're kind of commonly brought in when there's been a problem.
right,
And
right.
so we can drop into a job site and you can see the rate of people who are testing impaired really radically decline very quickly. And then the associated incidents also decline. We just produced a case study with one of our customers. We showed an 80% reduction in reasonable suspicion incidents for their first year of deployment.
Mhm.
They had zero impairment related incidents that year. They had like five the prior year. We produced a nearly 1,600% return on investment because they had to do so many fewer drug tests and all the associated time and costs with that. So, yeah, I mean, when people are faced with the reality that they can have their impairment at work detected, they stop showing up to work high.
Right, right,
It's kind of
right,
like
right,
it's like aiming a video camera at the cash register. The stealing stops.
right.
So that's kind of best case. I mean, it's an instant behavior modifier.
Right. Have you seen where people come up with I hate to call it a random way of doing randoms, but let's just say that somebody comes up and they're tested in the morning. Well, then they're going to be good for the whole morning, and then have that confidence of, well, maybe at lunchtime I want to do something. So
Mhm.
it definitely is going to alter the behavior out there, of course, too.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so
And the random screening that our employers do, I think has the kind of the strongest deterrent effect. And usually they're doing some sample of the population each day. So they'll do, 10, 20%, depending on the size of the company. They get tested every day when they start work. And that allows them to have, a very, very strong deterrent effect against those people showing up to work high. And,
mhm.
as I said, it's been very well tolerated. We've never had an employer rip us out because their employees were unhappy with the testing. It's really gone well. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, very good, very good. Let me see if there was really anything else I wanted to talk about. So we definitely know this does not replace the DOT testing. So you still
Correct.
have to
Yeah.
do
We're not
that
a
DOT
replacement for a
testing.
DOT. Yeah. Yeah. So we can be used above and beyond the DOT test, but we are not a replacement for that. I hope the DOT evaluates impairment detection technology sometime soon, but today they have not started that process.
Mhm. Okay. Very good, Ken. Very good. Well, this was really, really good, Ken. Could you take a couple seconds, let the folks know how they can find you, get more information out there on this whole thing?
Yeah, you bet. Thanks so much for the time. It's been really fun. You can find out more about the company at www.gaize.ai, Gaize.ai. And then my email, if anyone wants to reach out, is ken@gaize.ai. So pretty simple. You can also just Google impairment detection technology and we'll come right up. There's a couple other examples out there. I always tell people, look around at what's available and choose what's best for you. There's a couple different takes on the problem, but obviously I'm strongly biased towards what we've built.
Mhm. Awesome, Ken. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And
Thank you.
with that, episode 286 is complete. I want to thank everyone for joining me today. My name is Dr. David Ayers. Thank you and have a safe day.